Welcome to Project Hardway. In today's video, we're going to finish the head gasket job on my mom's 2008 Chevy Equinox with a 3400 V6. Whoa, look, that is a lot of video for one. So let's just get started on the car. Can we do that? Yeah, we'll do that. We'll put the heads on today and get this thing out of here. Let's get into it. So in the last video, the first part of this job, we tore into this car to find out what was wrong with it, why we were getting water in the coolant. We determined these were shot. Head gaskets. So in the meantime, I ordered parts, got those there, and I sent the heads off to a machine shop. Those came back a lot faster than I anticipated. They told me like a week and a half. They called me the next day. Hey, come get them. So here they are, all cleaned up, ready to go. Happy to report that after getting them milled flat, they were a little warped, but there was no issues on the pressure check or vacuum check, and they cleaned them up so dang good. They look really good. I would not have gotten them this clean myself, so shout out to those guys. Inside these valve assemblies, there's some seals, and while I've got the heads off of the car, I might as well go ahead and replace those since they come in the head gasket set anyway. Gonna need some specialty tools to get these off of here, right? So I've got this valve spring compressor. Bought this one from Harbor Freight after Tennessee state sales tax. $60 out the door. First things first, the chocolate starfish is my man Fred Durst. Nope. These trap the cylinder head and the valve spring assembly between these two apparatuses here. This goes on the side of the valve on the, down here. And then this goes up here. It's got this slot in here so you can get the keepers out. We'll look at that in a second. And this kind of locks it all into place. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to lay this head down on its side. And the instructions tell you to do this with the head sitting like this on an apparatus that'll hold it in place. Hold it in place. I don't have that, but we can get our rig set up here. So this handle here, see, it lets it move. We'll put that on the bottom side of the valve, and I should have just enough space in there. And if I've already been playing with this, but you adjust it, you twist it, this goes that way, this goes that way. You want this in, because that's how we're going to compress the spring. So make sure it's got two different size cups. Make sure you got the right one to sit on there on your valve. Make sure that the spring gets compressed without, coming loose. See, there we go. Got that on the bottom of the valve. Got that on top of the valve spring. So we can do this sideways too. The only thing about this is it makes getting these valve stem keepers in and out of the valve stem a little harder. But let me get you a little closer for this. I'm going to twist this handle, and as I twist that handle, you'll see that the spring starts to get compressed by the tool. And right in here, well, you probably can't see from that angle, the valve stem is now sticking out of the top of the valve spring. So if we go a little bit further with that, we can get those keepers out of there. See, that one just fell out. There's that one. Make sure you don't lose these. Holy cow. Now I'll back that screw off. And as I do, it'll unwind. And now the valve spring will be free to come off of the cylinder head. There we go. There's one valve spring. Here's what we're in here to get after. These valve stem seals right here. Might as well, while we're here, make sure we're not going to get any oil going through there. And see, with that now all freed up, I can pop that valve out. See? If you wanted to, you could go in with the wire brush on your bench grinder or whatever you want and clean those valves up a little bit more. It's up to you. It's your engine. Treat it the best you can. Alright, let's crack open this head gasket set and see what all we got in the box. This set non-returnable if opened. Well, you better have it right in there then, Golly. Ooh, look at that. There's stuff and things in there. What is that? Head gaskets. There's our new valve stem seals, just what we were after, right on top. Valve cover gaskets. Intake manifold gaskets that they say are an improved crush-proof design. They got these little metal bits here that'll help it not get squished too much when you torque down the intake manifold there. That's good. Miscellaneous seals and O-rings, intake gaskets, and things of the sort. Exhaust gaskets. More intake gaskets for the upper plenum. And our culprits, the head gaskets. Look at that. This is what it should look like. And that's what it did look like. Good? Not good. Now in a perfect world, we recording? Yep. In a perfect world, I should be able to just pop this thing off there. We're not in a perfect world, are we? Let's see if I can snatch her off there with these things. Nope. Yeah, there we go. And look, even after all that machine work and the cleaning up, there's still oil trapped under these things. Those are some of the biggest hankiness ones I've ever seen. Anywho, so I'm going to clean that up. Get all that old stuff off there. My ADH brain. My ADHD brain is also wanting me to talk about the other way to do this. Let's say your cylinder heads are on the car, right? Well, you're not going to be able to put this valve spring compressor on there. But you can run compressed air through the spark plug hole with a special adapter. And then they've got these little jaw type deals that you put on top of there. And in theory, the compressed air inside the cylinder should keep the valve from falling down into it while you take this apart, pop it off, pop your new one on there. Now you want to get a little bit of fresh oil on this thing by whatever means necessary. I've got a cap and a brush here. The point is to make this slide onto here easily so it doesn't damage it during installation. And you also want to get some oil on the inside of that seal so that it doesn't get damaged or roll up as you put the valve back in the cylinder head. I got this little scrubby brush here. I'm just going to spread some oil. Just a little bit of fresh brand new Castrol GTX high mileage in there for the old girl. We'll put that back down on there. Look, it didn't even get stuck. It just sits there. All right. I'll take my valve, lube it up a little bit, make sure it's clean, didn't pick up any shop debris. You don't want that. That's how you get your engine to start burning oil. Stand her up, find that hole in there, slide it in nice and easy. If it binds up, stop. Don't force it, okay? Slide that back down on there. Boom, that valve has got a new seal on it. Now we'll put that valve spring back in place. Now to put this thing back in place, I'm just going to push the valve up flush to the bottom of the combustion chamber. Put my valve spring back on the seat there. Get this little guy ready to go. We'll put my valve spring compressor back in place once I get the camera out of the way. Take this little guy here, set it back down in there. Oh gosh, gets a little finicky. This is why they say to do it standing and get up, so you're not sitting here trying to support everything while you reassemble it, but this is how we're doing it, isn't it? Pull that. Gonna have to clean that up now. Machine shops tend to be as sterile of an environment as they can be, because little dust, dirt, and debris in your engine is bad. Well, we didn't accomplish that, did we? Now, did we? All right, here we go. Can a guy just... I'll bet there's an easier way to hold that there. I won't be doing it today. That's not the name of the channel, is it? All right. Now, get that all that lined up real good. Snap this back down. Now we can tighten this arm back down. Compress the spring once again. You can see it sticking out of the top of there, the valve stem sticking out of the top of the valve spring. We could take our keepers, and you can put a little dab of grease on these to hold them in place if you feel fit. The important thing is that they get in there to where their little grooves line up, and it's going to lock in place and not send your spring into low Earth orbit when you release it. So now that we've got those somewhat where we want them, I'm going to hold them in place a little bit with my fingers and start relieving the tension on the valve spring compressor. And they will move you in right there. Let's see what you're seeing. Move you guys in right there and let you see as it comes up, it locks down on the tapered edge of those keepers, and Bob's your uncle. Your valve spring is now held in place, and you have a brand new valve stem seal on there. Last thing to do, you can use a rubber hammer or put something soft on it. I've got this little brass hammer so as to not booger anything up. Just kind of give it a little pop to set everything in place. She's done. Now I'm going to turn on some copyrighted music and do that 11 more times. We'll catch back up with you guys when I've got that done and we move on to cleaning up the block. Alright, we've got all of our new valve stem seals in place, ready for these heads to go back on, and my new alignment dowels came in. So once we get the block cleaned up, we'll be ready to go. Something in me wants to break out the Dremel and take off this hard edge right here. No, just put it together, I suppose. Man. But now we've got to get to this. So as you can see right here, there's an entire layer of head gasket cooked to the top of this block. Alright, so I vacuumed up all the extra debris. Now I went around the tops of the block with one of these flat blade razor deals carefully at a decent angle so as to not dig in and gouge, and cleaned up that big old layer of head gasket that was still stuck to the top of the block. You can see there's still some residue here. I have put cylinder heads back on with it like that. It's not going to really hurt anything, especially since we got the heads resurfaced. You can break out one of these if you want to. Zing, 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 zing. But if you're not real careful and real consistent, you could do more harm than you could good. But this is not one of my shit boxes. It's Mom's shit box. So I'm going to get some acetone and wipe off any extra residue that's left on here. Try to get as much of that off. And then we'll clean it up one more time. Get ready to put the heads back on. Alright, so I got the surface of the block pretty well cleaned up, as good as I care to. Next, these bolt holes have now probably got debris in them. And you don't want to put, head bolts in holes that are dirty because it can mess up your torque reading, give you a false torque reading, and then you've got problems later on. So we're going to clean up those threads a bit here. So my plan here for cleaning up these head bolt holes was to take my 12 by 1.5 tap and run it down through there. But the problem is that that tap is too wide to fit down in the bolt hole because this is for cutting, and I don't have a M12 by 1.5 thread chaser. So what I've decided to do instead, and I've done this with other engines before, is I've taken one of the old head bolts and I've cleaned up the threads in the wire brush, and I'm just going to take it and I'm going to hand thread it down into each head bolt hole and try to clean it out the best I can. I'll go over the head bolt hole with a shop vac, suck any debris out of it, run the head bolt down until I can't anymore, back it out, hit it with the vacuum again, just making sure that each one I can run the bolt down smoothly. There's no debris in there catching and making the bolt stop. I'm going to do that to all 16 head bolts. Watch right here as I squeeze this one down. When I took the head off, there was coolant that got down in the bolt hole. So when I put that bolt in, it's squeezing that out. It's a good thing we're doing this because that could be potential contaminants that could come up and then be between the surface of the block and the head gasket. So we know that that's going to be clean when we go to torque the heads. So with all that ready to go, one last thing I'm going to do before I go slapping the heads on. There's still coolant in the back side of this block, but these engines have got a feature that didn't come along, till later. It's very helpful. There's actually a drain plug on the side of the block back here. So we're going to throw it back up in the air. I'm going to crawl under there, drain what's left of that coolant out of the engine, so I know that everything in there is fresh and clean. All right, we made our way to the underside of the car. This here, that's the oil pan, bottom of the engine. We're on the back side of the engine. Exhaust manifold there, the exhaust pipe going back, CV axle. What we're after here is this bolt right there. There's a 15mm piece of hardware threaded into the block. I'm gonna pop up in there, take that out real quick, let it fall out, try to catch it in this children's beach pail, and then dispose of it the absolute correct right way. Yes. It's tight down here, but I've dealt with tighter. I gotta say that they packaged this thing into this engine bay okay-ish. Alright. I got nothing. What? There's the bolt. Where's the juice? So there's the bolt hole that we just took that bolt out of that's supposed to drain the block. And it is just full of crud. Nothing's coming out. I'm gonna poke something in there. Here we go, take two. What the heck? I don't understand. It's hard. Oh, there's liquid. Wowee. I had to dig around in there pretty well to get that to start flowing through, which tells me there's some crud in that there engine block, yeah? Oh, gross. Is it going in the bucket? That's incredible. Whew. So that leaves me concerned with the overall condition of the cooling system of this particular engine. That was a lot of crud. That should have just come out and all that coolant should have just went poof. But instead there's a bunch of crap in the bottom of the block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that plug out like it is now. And I'm going to leave the bucket underneath it like it is now. Then I'm going to try and go and flush the block the best that I can from up top. Maybe get a funnel or something. Pour some water down through the coolant passages to just try to get some whatever's down there, as much of it out as I possibly can. It's no wonder that this thing overheated and nuclear, meltdown, destroyed itself. It got hot, and for good reason. It was something just wasn't right. All right, got my funnel stuck off in one of the coolant passages on top of the block here. A little jug of water. That sounds like it's going straight to the floor. Great. Ah! Melo upgraded my drain pan to a Rubbermaid tote. Let's try it now. Try to find a spot over here on the other side of the block. Get a little different sweep on it. Doggone it, the holes don't open up over here like they do over there. Yep. In the dog it. Oh. Yep, there we go. That's in there. Get it from this side. And what I think I'll do is I'll just do this back and forth a couple of times and hope for the best. Alright, so the block is drained. The drain plug is back in the block. Godspeed. Let's put the heads back on. Alright, so before you start putting the heads back on, this is going to be your last opportunity to make sure everything's clean. So, make sure there's nothing down there in the cylinders on top of the pistons. Make sure all that stuff's clean. Make damn sure that your mating surfaces on the block and the cylinder head are clean. Now, before we go slapping these bad boys on, we got to put new dowels in here. So, we've got our dowels. What these do is they stick inside the head, and then they slip into another hole in the block, and it keeps everything lined up like it ought to be. Generally, these tend to stay in the block. In our case, they stayed in the head. I'm going to put them back that way. Yeah? Sure. But that also means that we'll be putting the head gasket on the cylinder head instead of the block and putting it all down on top of the engine together. So we got to be careful. But essentially, it's going to take that, set it there. You can use a hard rubber mallet. I'm going to use my little tiny brass hammer. Brass hammers, they're soft, so they don't, mar up the metal you're working with. And just tap those into place. Tap it, tap it, tap it. It's all in the hips. for the wrist in this case. Those are never going to come out of there. Now we need our head gasket. Sure. Aha! Head gaskets. Plural? Yes. Alright, so be careful with your head gaskets because you don't want to nick these things up. Sometimes, depending on the brand you buy, they'll have a stamp on them or writing or something that says top, so you know which side goes to the cylinder head side. With these, this little white line here, that is going to be the side that goes to our cylinder head. So we'll put this on here. And always check the alignment of your cylinder head gasket. You know, like I just tried to put it on upside down there. Sometimes not all the holes line up the same. Some, you know, you got to get them right. In our case, the head gaskets are perfectly symmetrical. Everything is going to work out just fine. So I'm going to hold this together like it is here. I'm going to take it over here and carefully set it on top of the engine block. Don't bump it into anything. I've seen in cases, you know, like I said earlier, this sits on top of the block and then you set the head on top of it. Guys kind of going to set their head down and they hit the gasket a little bit. Next thing you know, they got another blown head gasket. Doing it again. Dale. Well, your dad did that, but I get it, all right? So we don't want to make that mistake. So we're going to go straight from here to there and just set it and forget it. All right, here comes the airplane. Get out of the way, wiring harness. All right, we're not perfectly lined up, so we'll carefully shift it around until those dowels fall into place. And now that cylinder head is at least setting on top of the block, and we can go grab the new head bolts and cram them down there in the holes. Now we've got a new set of head bolts for this engine, and the reason is because most engines, their head bolts are torque to yield bolts, which what that means is that once they've been torqued to their final spec and then, you know, run for 160,000 miles and heated and cooled, the bolts will stretch, which means that if I take the old bolts, put them back in the engine and torque them down, they're going to be longer and further in the hole than they were previously, which in an engine like ours where there's a bottom to that hole, you could break through it and then you've got problems. So always replace your head bolts if it's necessary, which 99% of the time, yes. Now, if you watched the video where I took this engine apart, you'll know that I said several times, lay things out the way that you took them apart. And the reason is because not everything's always the same. In the case of this engine, it uses 8 head bolts. On the intake side of the head, there's 4 over here and 4 over here. On the intake side of the cylinder head, it uses a longer bolt than it does on the exhaust side of the cylinder head. So, you want to make sure that you can reference that if you don't know that or remember it. Luckily, in our case, there's only 2 length bolts, long and short. There's no 3rd or 4th crazy weird guy in there. So, these, because they don't go into a coolant passage, will not need any type of sealer on them, but I will put just a little bit of oil on them to lubricate them. Gonna put them in by hand till they're flat out on the head. Then the torque spec on these is 44 foot-pounds in a sequence that goes something like this. Inside to outside. When you take it off, you start from the outside and work your way around to the inside. When you torque something like this down, you start on the inside, working a crisscross or circular pattern to the outside so that you apply the torque evenly across the surface. Alright, so this diagram came with the new head bolts, and what it tells you is the sequence in which these bolts should be torqued. You can tell by the way it looks that this side here is your exhaust side, and this side here is your intake side inside the valve cover there. You should do it to 44 foot-pounds in that sequence, and then go back and put 95 degrees of rotation on each bolt in the same sequence. So what I'm going to do first is go through and snug them up just a little with my regular ratchet so we don't have to do much ratcheting with the torque wrench, and then we'll crank those puppies down. All right, cylinder head in place. Head bolts in place, snugged up with the ratchet. Now, if you recall, our torque sequence, it's there. 44 foot-pounds. Keep this around, all right? It can help you. Just lay it right there in front of your face. So I'm going to orient it so that it is relevant to how I'm looking at the head so I don't get confused. So we'll start back here. Go to 44 foot-pounds. I've got my torque wrench set up. If you don't know how to set up your torque wrench, I'm sure there's 750,000 TikTok videos. Go watch one of those. Here we go. I'm going to go slowly, applying pressure until it snaps. When you hear that click, you've reached the required torque. And now it's time to move on to the next one. So that was 1. Now we'll go over here to 2. And if you feel like things are feeling funny, like it's wanting to, you're getting a lot of resistance and it's not going smooth and things like that, stop! All right, take the bolt out, check the bolt, make sure that you got your torque set up right, make sure your bolt hole is clean, because if you don't, you're about to break something. Ask me how I know. D16Y8. Helicoil. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now when you do that, make sure that you are being smooth and consistent in the way you apply the torque. Because if you get on there and you just ramrod it, push it hard, hold it in a different position on the wrench or anything like that, the way that the torque is being applied can change, and you may not be getting the correct amount of torque on your bolt. You may be under torquing it or over torquing it. Make sure you follow the sequence. Now, after we've achieved the 44 foot-pounds, it tells us to go to 95 degrees of rotation in the same sequence. Let's take a look at what that is. All right, so for this task, I'm going to use my breaker bar. You can use your ratchet, you can use your torque wrench, it doesn't matter. But essentially, you need to put 90 degrees of rotation, and that's not the right bolt. You want 90 degrees of rotation on the bolt after 44 foot-pounds. What is 90 degrees? It's a quarter of a turn. It's, you know, a right angle. So just look at where you're at, and if you're any good at eyeballing this stuff, you can do it just fine. If you're really concerned about it, they make what they call a torque angle gauge that you can put on here between your socket and your wrench, and it holds this peg on the cylinder head and it reads the angle at which you've turned the bolt. 90 degrees is cut and dry. So we're just going to take this, I'm going to go to about right here, essentially about as far as I can go before running into the fender well. And again, don't ramrod this. It's a great amount of pressure you're applying there, and if you gack up those threads, bad day. Always makes me nervous, because once you start getting up into that higher torques, all you can think about is just them threads. Just pow. All right. 3, 4, 5, 6. A doggone fuel line in the way. We're not doing that angle. I guess if you're limited on space, if you can eyeball 1/8 of a turn, 45 degrees, do that and do 2 of them. The key thing is the resounding amount of patience. All right, let's see if we can get, yeah, we're not gonna get there with that. So in this case, I'm gonna go on this one to a 45, which is gonna be about right here. Stop, reset. I mean, we're just eyeballing it at this point. It's damn well close enough. And that now is installed and torqued close enough to spec. So that's good. We're good to go on that side of the engine. I'm gonna turn on some copyrighted music, turn off the camera, do this other cylinder head, and I'll catch up with you guys when I get that on there. Well, that ought to do it for today's video. We got the heads back on. Join me in the next video where hopefully we can get that thing finished up, get it out of the way, get on to what I'm doing right now. Thanks again for watching, guys. Remember, sometimes gotta do things the hard way.